The Catholic Church has lately been the most active, well-organized, and well-funded component of the anti-abortion lobby, but for most of its history, the Catholic Church adopted a flavor of the Aristotelian position that males become ensouled around 40 days and females after 80. Ensoulment at the moment of conception was considered an impossibility, and abortion of a fetus was only murder if it was a fully formed human being, meaning in the last stages of pregnancy. In 1588, Pope Sixtus V made it church law that having an abortion or using contraception meant excommunication. This was immediately overturned by his successor, Pope Gregory IX, returning the church to its original stance. In 1869, Pope Pius IX reintroduced excommunication for abortion. Church scholars concluded after centuries of debate that the Bible is decidedly inconclusive on the point at which life begins. Pius thus decreed that the only prudent thing to do was to protect human life from the earliest possible moment, meaning fertilization and the creation of the diploid cell. That's right, this position came about as the Catholic Church covering its own ass because it couldn't discern a clear direction. It should be noted, however, that this was not a statement that life begins at conception. Is it coincidence that this came just 10 years after Charles Darwin published The Origin of Species? The Catholic Church felt the origin placed human life on a level with animals and removed the sanctity of human life, and thus were loud critics of Darwin's ideas. I suspect the Church may have felt a need to make a statement within its own doctrine regarding the sanctity of life. I haven't been able to confirm this, so any insight would be appreciated. Pius IX was also the guy that established as canon the infallibility of the Pope.
You will respect my authority!
Subsequent popes have added their own influence to completely reverse the Church's original position that ensoulment is impossible at the moment of conception. Catholic theologians have also concluded that since ensoulment is a divine act, the fertilized egg is also an individual with all the rights thereof, and designated a status separate of its parents. This complete reversal, of course, had to be done to make church doctrine jive with the canon of the Immaculate Conception, which was also introduced by Pope Pius IX. In an ectopic or tubal pregnancy, the life of both the mother and the fetus is at grave risk. Tertullian and Augustine, two founding philosophers of Catholic doctrine, maintained that an abortion in such a case was allowable to protect the life of the mother, since the fetus would not yet be fully formed. Today's Catholic doctrine, however, maintains that an ectopic pregnancy is not to be aborted. The Church recognizes the significant risk to both mother and fetus, but maintains the position of better 2 deaths than 1 murder. We heard in the news just this past week that the Vatican's chief bioethicist was being pressured to resign. His crime was defending doctors who performed an abortion on the twin pregnancy of a 9-year-old girl who was raped by her stepfather. The Vatican would rather the 9-year-old girl and the twins all have died trying to complete an impossible pregnancy than abort the twin fetuses and save at least one of the lives. The Catholic Church has only been able to completely reverse its claims on abortion in the beginning of life because there is no clear direction on these issues from Scripture. Throughout history, positions on abortion have been varied by governments for various reasons. Ancient Assyrians held harsh penalties for women found to have had a self-induced miscarriage, as it needed to build armies. Soviet Russia legalized abortion as a matter of public health to reduce illegal and unsafe abortions. A few decades later, abortion was outlawed when Soviet women were charged to give the nation a new group of heroes. 2 decades later, abortion was re-legalized again for public health reasons to reduce illegal and unsafe abortions. There are different cultural views on when human life begins. In rural Japan, it's when a newborn cries for the first time. In northern Ghana, it's 7 days after birth and only after the child is named. For some Ayatal Aborigines, it's not until the child is named, which can occur up to 3 years after birth. For several Native American tribes, human life begins when the child starts breastfeeding. But why would we expect an ancient text to have any insightful knowledge about such a thing anyway? Certainly in a time and a place where stillbirths and miscarriages were a simple fact of life that contributed to a simply ghastly infant mortality rate, it seems reasonable that they would have followed the concept that life begins with the first breath. Then and only then it's a life that must be cared for, nurtured, fed, watered, and protected. Until it takes that first breath, it's just another body to bury. Take something as simple as germ theory. According to the Bible, diseases were the work of demons and plagues were punishments from God. We know better today. Modern science tells us so much more about the process of fetal development than Bronze Age man ever understood. So this leaves us with strong evidence that the Bible never would have anything to say about such a thing as the beginning of life or the sanctity of it, given the people who wrote it. This fits when we look at other more cryptic passages such as we find in a Psalm 139, which talks about being knit together in the secret place, a reference to the mother's womb, and being woven together in the depths of the earth. These are hardly coherent claims for the beginning of life, but they are lyrics of songs and poems, so one can't expect a great factual insight from them. Job 10:10 asks strangely, "Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese?" That's a bit weird and far too abstract to be insightful, unless you fancy yourself as cheese. Another claim made by anti-abortionists is that the development of the fetus is a divine thing. Science gives us lots of evidence that fetal development bears some sizable fingerprints of our own evolutionary trail. You will find that the embryos of all vertebrates, bisons, rabbits, chickens, whales, and us, follow the same developmental patterns. They all develop a notochord, body segments, gill structures, and a tail. Lanugo is a fine coat of fur or hair that is a throwback to our primate ancestors. It covers the whole body. It doesn't disappear until approximately week 40, and frequently babies are born bearing the lanugo. From an evolutionary perspective, this has an explanation. But if it is of divine design, why do we need fur in the womb? Does it get chilly at night? Is it drafty in there? Why do we grow a tail only to have it shrink and fuse into the base of our pelvis, forming the coccyx or tailbone? In rare cases, this fusion doesn't occur, creating human babies with the tail intact. Again, is this best explained by evolutionary processes, or is it evidence of a lousy design? Our nervous systems wrap around and through other systems. Nerves from our ear take 3 wildly different paths to get to different parts of our brain in order to make our ear work. Our ear does more than just hear. It controls our balance and equilibrium, and equalizes pressure so that we can continue hearing at different altitudes. Is this because our ear evolved from 3 different systems of ancient aquatic vertebrates? Or is this evidence that God's a puzzle freak? If God is actually creating us in the womb, why does he use such a bizarrely inefficient construction plan rife with points of failure and imperfect structures, prone to complications at birth and rapid degradation later in life? Creationists tout the perfection of the human eye. If the eye is so perfectly designed, why do some 70% of us require optical correction? Or why would God give a shrimp eyes that are at least 4 times more accurate than ours can ever be? It is evidence of a poor design, an incompetent designer, or no designer at all. Blood is very important in the Bible. Blood sacrifices, blood covenants, the blood of the Lamb, and so on. Blood along with breath is seen as another key to life. The human fetus doesn't begin producing its own blood supply until about week 22. That's more than 5 months along. Until then, the mother's blood supply is used. So if murder is defined as the spilling of blood, in the first 5 months you are spilling the blood of the mother. In fact, over 90% of abortions happen before 13 weeks, and abortions after 22 weeks are performed rarely and usually only in highly unusual and dire circumstances. Viability at 22 weeks is not considered realistic, as the lungs are not yet fully developed. Of the very small percentage, that's less than 10% of those who might survive, half will develop complications from brain damage caused by the undeveloped oxygen delivery system. Higher-level brain functions don't begin until week 26, which is also when the lungs are fairly well developed. The fetus appears to show an awareness of pain signals now, and many consider this to be the point where life begins. But it is not the only possible or even reasonable definition. When the full scope of the issue is considered, one can certainly have objections to abortion at differing stages and for differing reasons, but to state that those objections are biblically instructed or divinely directed is a claim that's just plain false. I personally maintain a view that since the development of the fetus is a smooth metamorphic process, there's not one distinct point at which we can identify the beginning of a new, unique, sentient, and independently viable human life. A fetus reaches a viable stage before naturally exiting the womb, but it seems to me that the drawing of breath outside the womb is kind of the final proof of viability. And in that sense, I guess I'm not that far removed from the beliefs the Bronze Age man might have held, but for different reasons. In either case, by the time this stage of viability is reached, the fetus is well into the protections afforded by law, and therefore I see no reason to change anything about the current situation. I know one response I will receive is that this simply sees the developing fetus as little more than a tumor or growth to be removed. This fallacious argument starts off by asserting that both pregnancies and tumors can have characteristics of being either benign or harmful. The argument's thrust lies in an emotional appeal that tumors are almost always bad news, whereas babies are cute and cuddly. Well, mostly. Begging the question of how one could equate the two and leaving the observer with an absurd dissonance. This argument is nothing more than a smokescreen designed to appeal to an audience for which critical thought is perceived as a tool of Satan. I am always willing to entertain the idea that I may be mistaken, especially when it comes to reference material as poorly constructed as the Christian Bible, so please post a video response or leave comments below if you feel you have a clearer reference than I have provided here. I'm Smiling Skeptic. Try to end each day with a smile, and be excellent to each other. Peace.